Thank you so much for being my friend, Jory. Let's be honest.
I was telling my spouse this morning, I was like, 2 hours? I was like, I'm gonna have to be intelligent and kind for 2 hours.
We never really anticipated that it would take that long, but Michael's
No.
super long-winded, like wrapping up. And Michael's like, so didn't you say that you changed religions recently?
I was just wondering if you found in that poem, and here's my explication of the poem for 10 minutes. Did you agree with me or are you wrong?
All right, fresh cup of coffee. I am ready to go.
All right.
Roast or roast?
All right, let's get into it. Oh no, all I have is the poem. I don't have the author, so I can't even introduce it.
Do you
Corey,
want me
Let's,
to read the author bio?
yeah.
yeah, would you do that?
Yeah, happy to do that.
But
Okay.
yeah, so welcome to the toast or roast segment of our show. Jory Mickelson has picked out a treat for us, and so let's get right into it.
Corrie Williamson was born on a small farm in southwestern Virginia. She is the author of two previous books of poetry: The River Where You Forgot My Name, which is a 2019 Montana Book Award honor book, and Sweet Husk, which won the 2014 Perugia Press Prize and was a finalist for the 2015 Library of Virginia Poetry Award. The poem is called Meditation and comes from Corey's new book, Your Mother's Bear Gun, from River Books 2025. Meditation. Quiet, I say to the mind, and the mind says frog song, bear emergence, death of all salmon kind, local proliferation of buried nuclear silos, tomorrow's breakfast, blossom riot of bees in pollen tresses, a child reaching into a sleek, unlocked gun safe. May all beings be safe, I go on, and the mind hears only scriffle scutter of mice in the insulation. May all beings be well, I insist, and the mind pries open the eye to see one, like a fat, swayed knuckle, paw tucked, slinking behind the stove, along the corner and out of sight. May all beings know contentment in hard times. The mind reminds me that mice are thigmotactic and hug a wall like a mother's hip. Ah, little cannonball of knowing. May all beings know peace, I say, but the mind already is planning where to put the poison.
All right. Since this was your offering, if you want to kick us off with the conversation about the poem.
Sure. One of the things I really like about this poem in particular is the wryness or the awareness that the poem has about
Mhm.
the difference between uh, our human ideals and our actual way that we are in the world. So, the speaker in the poem is like, may all beings be well, and may all beings find contentment, may we all live in peace, may we all be our best selves. Meanwhile, the mind continues to churn out 100 million things, continues to mull over like the dangers and the things wrong in the world. And it's like is planning on killing the mouse with perfect equanimity to live in harmony with all things.
So that was one of the things I love. I love the kind of self-interruptions that are occurring. Like you said, may all beings be safe, I go on, and may all beings be well, I insist. May all beings know contentment, but the mind is always just jabbing in these other thoughts every time. And that kind of playful, like kind of dark back and forth that occurs throughout the poem. It's like kind of prayers gone awry. And I really enjoy that.
I like how you say prayers because it reminded me of like church and a little bit of like may this, may that, like like just these,
Mhm.
may this, may we this and but also like my own mind, whether if I don't go to church anymore, but like sitting there and and making up words in my head. Like I love these like made up words. Like riffle scutter, it's like now seems like a
Scribble
good time to
Sutter.
start inventing a language in my head. That's exactly how my mind works. Or like I go to bed, like last night I was like in the middle of trying to sleep and I had like three Chapel Roan songs like simultaneously go. And then I love that, like the humor of when you're trying to recenter your brain. Like you're trying, like you keep like, okay, here I go. I'm going off. Like, okay, center it back. Okay. Like, and then you trail off again and you center it back. And so I do love that a lot.
I love that part. I do love the language, like the scriffle scutter, like you had said, of mice. I like the creatures that are kind of referenced. And a lot of the times they're kind of pitted against, like you have the bear, you have salmon, and you have the bees, but there's something going on about the fact that it's like this human versus mouse. And it's like, it's not really, I, I mean, we don't have like a huge mouse issue here, I don't think, but it's not like a giant problem that I can tell from the poem. It just seems to be sort of this small, like this fat suede knuckle of a creature, but it's not necessarily seen as a threat, or it doesn't seem like a threat. I mean, even the hug a wall like a mother's hip, it makes it seem very, very childlike or very small, very kind of frail. And yet there's still this idea of planning to poison it. And it's like that says something very much about human nature in some ways, of the kind of like whether it's a xenophobia of sorts, but just this idea that there's this creature running around that is separate and not necessarily a threat, but at the same time, despite all these talk of like peace or trying to be well and contentment, you're still finding ways to kill this thing. And I think that's just, it's a very, like, it's an understated statement in here. It's not making a giant statement. It's not saying it overtly, but there's something very like sinister about that, where you have these two parts of the speaker that are like, one is this very almost like Zen-like quality of trying to find this peace, and at the same time thinking about, death to all salmon kind. And I just, that juxtaposition is so fun and so interesting, and it says a lot without having to just overtly say it. I love just looking at it from like the language perspective. Like I love emergence, proliferation, sleek, tresses, like all these beautiful sounds and beautiful words that are included. It just feels very musical, and it feels very much like a poem in some ways to me. Despite it that it's not like highbrow, let's say, but it definitely feels steeped in this poetic, beautiful language, and it feels very, very I don't want to say put together like it's rigid in any way, but it feels very much constructed in this beautiful, poetic way.
We talked a little bit in the last episode about observational humor and how like some things you don't realize are so universal and relatable until they get kind of like packaged up into these ways. And like, I mean, I live on the East Coast and I know the absolute internal rage of having a mouse scratching inside your. I'm talking like, yeah, like this could bring you to like the point of insanity. And then, of course, where it's like, and the worst part is if you catch sight of one, after like you're trying to have this peaceful moment and then you catch sight of the little fucker, and it's yeah, like I'm trying to have this moment, I'm trying to center my mind, and I can't help but think three steps ahead of like when I'm going to murder you. I just think it has that sort of observational humor that's very relatable, just on a human level of like us when we want to try and be deep, we want to try and clear our thoughts, we want to, like have these Zen moments, and yet we're up against kind of the variables around us that can break that moment and break our patience. So I think that there is a, I don't know, just like a realness to this, because this is exactly what seems like what my kind of meditation process. It's like it's literally like watching like Kate meditate like in lines like right in front of me. I will say though, I did find because this ultimately did seem like a poem about a mouse. I did, and I loved the beginning, quiet, I say to the mind, and the mind says frog song. Like, I get that. Like, the sound, again, East Coast, Massachusetts, frogs at night. It's like, it's an event. Like, it's loud. It never stops. It's crazy. So I love that. And then I got a little, like, I guess maybe I was I was kind of hovering on that image, and then it was like bear emergence, and it felt a little out of place. Like it was like, okay, here comes a bear, and then now like death to all salmon kind. That little I guess it felt like a tough start, is what I'll say for me. I was kind of like, where are we going? Until it kind of then I feel like the poem like started to find itself in the next couple of lines after that. But for me, that was just a little bit of a tough start.
So I didn't mind the opening like that. I found a lot of the examples really interesting. Like there are so many things that in that first section that feel like a little more threatening than the mouse itself. So like the mind is sort of like spiraling and then fixating on the one thing that seems the least dangerous of the of the options. I mean, if I'm thinking of bears and like death of salmon kind, which would maybe collapse like a certain kind of ecosystem, nuclear silos, all these, and the child especially reaching into an unlocked gun safe. I mean, there are all these very, very like much more seemingly dangerous things that are occurring that never quite like go off, let's say. They're just kind of there. And then it settles into this mouse,
Hmm.
which like is literally only making noise. I think that's the most dangerous thing it's doing is like in the
Purple Scudder.
insulation. Yeah, exactly. So, and like I said, the way it's described even is not all that scary. I mean, fat suede knuckle, paw tucked, slinking behind the stove. Like it's just seems very, very just kind of there, very non-aggressive, not really, not even the potential to be very dangerous at all. So I like that it's almost the mind going away from what is actually dangerous and dark to something that is manageable. So I just kind of like that transition from these things to just what seems to be a little, and like what little cannonball of knowing. Like I just think it's such an interesting kind of spiral into something else. I enjoyed that opening. So I disagree, Kate. I thought it was a great opening.
No, I like what you're saying actually. That makes sense to me that, like that you're trying to clear the mind, and the mind is so like weighed down by like so much fear and possible, this just the
Mhm.
possibility of when the next shoe is going to drop in whichever part of your life. And then what an interesting way to kind of make the meditation, just ironically start to be centered on this mouse, and that actually is the diversion,
Mhm.
not the clear mind, not the like serenity, not the like, the thoughtlessness, that the mouse is actually saving the speaker from these sort of darker thoughts. But yeah, so I could see that, and
Mhm.
I appreciate that. I guess I just felt like I wanted a little bit more of that bear. I was like, well, the bear emerged. Like, bear emergence.
I actually have some insider knowledge of the poem. I don't know if I should. Um,
Oh,
so Corrie Williamson was the recipient of a 2020 Penn Northwest Marjorie Davis Boyden Wilderness Writing Residency, spending 7.5 months writing and living off the grid in a remote section of the Rogue River in Southwest Oregon. And that was during 2020, and I was in uh, the Wurlitzer Foundation, the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation in Taos at roughly the same time. And through our work, we became pen pals where we were writing letters. She would have to drive 2 or 4 hours to get into town to get the mail. And so we had this slow correspondence over the start of the pandemic
wow.
when everything was in rolling lockdowns. And she's living off the grid, and I'm living in this high desert mountain town. And so, like, she was literally like trying to control a mouse infestation in her cabin off the grid. So bear emergence and frog song are both the signs in our letters that spring is happening, because she also had to deal with like deer, bears, mountain lions, you name it. Nature was like crowding in ways that we don't normally get to encounter. So that's like my insider knowledge. The other thing I really like about the poem is like my workplace has an infestation right now. And initially we were told that they were rats, and I live in Bellingham. And so, we have like these Norwegian rats and these harbor rats, and they're huge and disgusting. And everyone's like, that's disgusting. And then it turned out that they were mice, and somehow mice are much more cute, like the little sweet, oh, look, it's tucking its paw. But like rats are disgusting, but they're basically just larger versions of mice, or like squirrels are adorable, but somehow like possums are
Yeah.
hideous. So
Yeah.
I really like that contrast. Like the crisis was downgraded slightly because it was a mouse over a rat. But we still need to kill the mouse because of all these things.
Mhm. And that brings up an interesting point just about language itself. Like I feel like mouse and mice is a much more pleasant sounding than rat. Rat is very it's like a harsh word. And I'm like, if we just renamed the rat something cuter, like they talk about snakes being danger noodles. Like if we got to rebrand the rat, and I bet people would love it.
Your
You mean
noodle.
like Chuck E. Cheese versus the child rat casino?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating backstory though to the poet. I love that. That just kind of makes me think, because I was kind of placing this more in like a home, like not this very off-grid area. So now looking at it from that lens, it's really fascinating because it's like the any of the references towards more like quote unquote civilization is kind of pushed out, and it's just like the man versus nature trope. It's like there's just this person and the mouse, and it's just becoming just these two beings in this area, and I kind of love that for this. It makes it very epic.
I think that, yeah, adding a little bit of those context clues helps too. And yeah, because I mean now obviously it's spring here, and we have bears too, and I'm like just waiting for it 'cause they come around quite a bit. And so I and the frogs, and yeah, so I guess that does help. I wonder a bit about the you know, the child reaching into a sleek, unlocked gun safe is such a serious, scary, heavy image that felt. I don't want to say it's out of place because like I said, it's like when you're trying to quiet the mind, it's amazing what your mind will do to
Mhm.
you. Like, and the things that just pop into your mind. But I think because it goes from that and shifts so dramatically to the mouse and then kind of just stays on the mouse. I don't know. I worried, or not worried. It makes me wonder if the heaviness of that image got lost at all, or maybe abandoned, or is it even necessary to expand on? It seems like a very hard pivot. Again, like when you saying like you're bringing in these extra context clues, I'm kind of wondering if maybe like there could have been just a few more clues as to that would hint to why that train of thought, like what made, because I could tell you all sorts of weird reasons why, like I might lie in bed and try and clear my mind and meditate, and all of a sudden I'm like thinking about like a Pee Wee Herman episode that like frightened me when I was like 8 years old, and if I put that in a poem, like somebody would be like, and then I just like say it, and then I move on. Like, be like, why the fuck did you bring up Pee Wee Herman? If you go into it of the mind that like every
Mhm.
line is essential, right? Which is like, what we do,
Mhm.
I guess, as critiquers of poetry and editors and thinkers, and that every line is essential. I want to know more about that line and kind of, because there are a lot of things I fear, and there are a lot of things I can relate to in other people's
Mhm.
fears, but it made me wonder, like, why that one fear? Like, why that one and not
Mhm.
like a man breaking in, and or like, or just some kind of other act of violence or tragedy or whatever. So it felt like maybe some more of why that particular example, like, as opposed to just like, when you come when you fall in sometimes into the trap of creating lists in your poems to try and gain momentum. So you're like, well, let me just think of like what I can write to add to this list, and it works, sure. But like, are you just reaching for something to add to the list? Or is this like an essential line here that's so important to the poem? Do you know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying there for sure. Like I can see how you get out of that line. Like the unlocked gun safe and then may all beings be safe. Like there's that kind of almost dream logic that goes from safe to safe. So I can see getting out of that line. But I do understand where you're coming from. I don't know how we get into that line from
Mm.
the previous phrases per se. So I understand that critique for sure. And it is a very like just personally one of those lines, like you said, that is the most frightening. And like we're not a gun owner household here, so we don't have to worry about that. But there have been times when our kids have gone to places where I know for a fact that someone has a gun, and that is always terrifying. Like we've warned the kids about gun safety, but kids being kids, like they do stupid things and unsafe things sometimes. And you just hope that their mistakes can be something they learn from and grow from and not something that they make one mistake and like you can never recover. And that's so frightening sometimes. And balancing out that fear, like as a parent and, not trying to make them paranoid of the world, but at the same time, keeping them safe. So
Mm.
yeah, it is a tough line. And I'm not sure if it fits per se in the way that you're saying. So I get that.
There's so much nature, right? Like there's, we have the frogs and the salmon and the bears and the bees and oh my gosh, like just so much nature. I mean, I guess aside from the buried nuclear silos, which also like valid, valid, like I totally could see my brain going somewhere like, what about this too? But it just, I guess there is just a lot of um like person versus nature happening, and kind of like where you can kind of feel one with nature, and when you can kind of like negatively rub up against nature, and you're not exactly quite in like in that kind of space comfortably. So yeah, I don't know, those were just two parts where I felt like, okay, maybe these were just like things to add to kind of create that momentum, and then it like leads to where the poem's going. But yeah, I don't know.
Every part that is like actually dangerous seems to be like the human elements of this poem, where
Yeah.
you have the nuclear silos, you have the gun, you have, the poison that the person is thinking about. And the other things are it's just nature. It's frog song and bear and salmon and bees. And it's actually fairly just like it's just natural. It's there. It's not threatening. It's not, it's just happens to be just part of the world.
Yeah,
And it's interesting that the human elements of the poem are the things that are the actual threats. So
including the own speaker, like the speaker
yeah, the
himself.
speaker.
Or yeah, so like to be like at the end, like how I'm going to poison this thing and kill it. Yeah, like it's, and that part's fascinating, I think, for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And like, yeah, like everything else, all the human made things and all the human concepts here are the things that are the worst part. And even if you think of Death of All Salmonkind, I mean, uh, that is arguably easily also going to be a a human made disaster as well.
One of the things I like about the poem and describing the mouse in all of these like cute ways, fat suede knuckle, paw tucked,
Yeah.
um, you know, hugging the wall like a mother's hip, And then it
Hmm.
goes, ah, little cannonball of knowing. And at first I thought that was about the mouse, but I really think it's
Hmm.
about the mind. Like the mind is the cannonball of knowing all these things and hurtling through the the carefully constructed structure of the meditation. It's like that, even the mind is actually the terrible weapon here.
Oh, that's
Definitely.
interesting. I had been reading it as the mouse, but that reading makes so much more sense because once again, it's that threat level. The thing that is the
Yeah.
threat is it's humans, it's the person, it's the speaker, and I love that idea. I love the mind
I mean,
being a little cannonball of knowing is like what a great phrase that is.
Like
mouse
I
can
think,
be a little
go ahead, sorry.
cannonball of knowing too. Like it's hugging,
Hmm.
it hugs the wall looking for danger. So like
Hmm.
absolutely, um, it can be both. That's what I
Hmm.
like. It's like both things can be true.
I think that maybe even, sometimes the act of meditation, if you're not good at it or well practiced, which I am not, but that it almost feels like it goes against your own natural instincts. You're like, okay, quiet the mind, but the mind is like, no, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. Like, so I'm just gonna like you. That's why I like this part of like, this very stiff and rigid language of like, may all beings this and may all this bug and let the mind do this. It sounds like someone who's very like unpracticed in meditation, and I'm not saying that in an insulting way. I'm saying it in a way that like I can absolutely 100% relate to.
Hmm.
That you're just trying to go through these motions, but ultimately, like the nature of our minds, the nature around us, like that, all of that's going to prevail over you trying to control, like mentally control a situation. I mean, and the mouse is cute in this poem. The mouse is cute, little knuckle. So it's just funny that like at the end it's like that you're going to this place of Zen that's gonna end in like murder. This is an interesting
Yeah.
one. Is this was this published is it this is in the book or was it
Yeah.
like so I didn't
Yeah, it's the first poem in the book, and the book's called Your Mother's Bear Gun, and then the poem that immediately follows it is You're hoarding guns, I'm growing herbs.
yeah.
So like I
Nice.
feel like I feel like Kate, you're right that the line about the gun safe may not isn't essential to the poem, but as a first poem in a book, it might be setting themes that come
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, like
Um,
there's a larger narrative that kind of goes on. And that's interesting too, because, that's always something that we come up against when reading like a poem on its
Yeah.
own individually, as opposed to like contextually in its own collection where it serves a purpose. And I mean, it's even more fascinating to know that this is like the first poem in the collection, because obviously it's setting
Hmm.
a tone, setting a like a little bit of a story. That is wonderful, I think. Like to start off a collection in this kind of like very mysterious way where you're almost like getting a little a little peek into the speaker's personality, the
Hmm.
speaker's sense of humor, obviously the failed attempt at meditation, and the landscape as well. So it really lays down the groundwork, I think, that could definitely make for a very interesting collection for sure.
I actually like that it's the opening of the book. That makes the poem feel like it works in a much better. Like if this were in the middle, I think it would like I don't think it would work as well. So I
Yeah.
kind of like that it's the opening like that. Like order is one of those things. Like ordering a manuscript is such a it's there are some people that like our friend Clint, it just alphabetical.
He just throws it in the
I
air
was
like
just gonna say,
oh
I was like, you just had a guess. You said, I never read poetry books in order. I just kind of randomly, like, my spouse is a not into poetry at all.
Yeah.
Um, and like I had dedicated a chapbook that I got published to him, and
Mhm.
and I said, well, what did you think? And he was like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to read it in order. And I was like, it's so interesting, like all these if you work in the medium, you just assume these things, and it's like, like there's like a narrative arc here, like or like there's like an imagistic thread? Like, what are you talking about? This is just like one pagers that I can look at and like maybe snap a photo for Instagram if it fits in the social media tile. So
Exactly. No, it's such an interesting process ordering a manuscript and putting pieces together like that. And like I know some just absolutely don't care. They don't care about the order. They're like, a reader will figure, like, they'll read whatever order it's in and they'll come up with their own connections and threads. And I don't know. I'm right on the fence with that. I'm too much of a control freak. I think I love the idea of ordering something, but it must be freeing not to care.
I think I'm hoping to steer away from trying to create narrative threads, even though I think it's probably still going to happen. I feel like I think we're all like storytellers in our own way, and it'll just happen the way it happens. But yeah, it's like an album, you know, it may be like, it may not be like a linear narrative thread, but there's like a flow and something where that it just kind of makes sense, like intuitively, I guess, like that this poem's going to come next and this poem's going to go next. So I really have a hard time, like, yeah, you're saying like Clint with his alphabetical poems. I'm like, I cannot relate to that. I don't even like it's kind of like, if only it was that easy, like, but
I know there was one like essay or article that I read a long time ago that was talking about ordering this manuscript, and they had a poem about their father who had passed away, and they brought the death in early in the manuscript so that when they referenced the father later, it was like a ghost. And I thought that was such an intelligent, interesting thing to talk about in that sense, that instead of having the death come later and building up to that, you had the death come early so that it was like an apparition coming through the book, like whenever the father was referenced. And I was like, oh, that's another layer. That's very fascinating, which wouldn't happen in alphabetical order, Clint. God.
I think we should go for it. What do you think?
No, I think so. I think we are ready to officially cast our votes. So, Jory, if you'd like to do the honor of letting us know, if I believe I know, but whether you toast or roast meditation.
I'm gonna toast it.
Yes, naturally. Kate, you want to go? Or you want me to go?
Okay. I'm not going to say more that I haven't already said because I don't want to repeat myself. But I like what Jory added to my understanding, even though it's subtle. I feel like maybe if the poem was titled like Meditation in Spring or something, like where it's just adding just a little bit more of a context clue to kind of really get a sense of the space that the speaker is kind of in. But I've gone through this and I'm a pendulum on this one. I've been back and forth, and for everything that I already said, where it's just some of the, you know, the stiff lines and then these like hard, you know, images, and then kind of it all end up being about this mouse. And at the end of the day, I have to say, because this person's mind, this speaker's mind is so much like my own that I feel like this could have been my own meditation. I'm gonna go and toast this as well. I think it's funny. I think it's cute. I think it's and I think it does lay the groundwork for more expansion, which is exciting to me. So it makes me interested to keep like to pick up the book and read and see kind of where this story keeps going.
Yeah, I like that. I like that word expansion. I think that's definitely, especially knowing that this is right at the beginning, it does feel like an opening to bigger ideas or more elaborations on these different natural elements or human elements. So, you know, instead of repeating myself, I would just say toast. I really enjoyed this poem. I like that juxtaposition between kind of dangerous humanity and more, I don't want to say exactly delicate or fragile, but a more vulnerable natural world that is there. I think it says interesting things without needing to stand on a soapbox about it. And like you said, there's that humor there. There's that relatable mind behind the writing. So toast.
Three
So
toasts.
I know. I always, it's funny because I always feel like I'm going too easy on a lot of the poems that our guests bring in, but we just invite really good readers. So
Well, sometimes I think this deliberation, I guess you could say, kind of it helps. Like I said, I kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but you know, and ask me tomorrow,
yeah.
maybe I have a different opinion. But today, but no, thank you so
Yeah.
much. This was a fun one. Nice and
Yes.
short and interesting and relatable.
Yeah, it did. It did.
I mean,
It
there was
gave me
tempting of
exactly.
bringing This Poem is America, but I felt like
No.
That would have been great. Just
Thanks.
roast that one
Thanks,
all over.
Jory. Just we looked at it again. It still sucks. So thank you very much, Jory, for bringing this home to the table. Thank you very much for offering to your time. Everybody, Jory Mickelson, a new book, Picturing, out now, and a couple of older books, All This Divide and Wilderness Kingdom, are also out, all which can be purchased. Please do. Like I said, Jory is a fantastic poet. If you need a sample, feel free to come to the seat. Poetry and Reviews. We published one of Jory's poems, and it is also fantastic. Just buy all of Jory's books. You won't regret it.
and you can, when you're done with them, you can resell them to used bookstores. So
that's right. Go to Jory's website.
Uh-huh.
They will sign the book. Then you can resell it. It'll be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be with you both and talk poetry, and to have you both critically engage and think deeply about poetry. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and
Thank you so
your
much.
just approach and everything that you're writing so interesting, and I'm excited to read more, and totally into it. So this is really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Until next time, everybody.
Till next time.
Yeah.
I'm off to do the Lord's work now, literally. So
That's right. Go handle your congregation.
I gotta pee. I gotta go on camera real quick.
Back to the low point of the
show.
It's so much better. It's always so much better.